Justice was served, but the message is even bigger. Courage, dignity, and standing up for what's right. That's what this story is all about. If this inspired you, hit that like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. The sun burned bright over Los Angeles as families flocked to the city's biggest water park, Blue Falls. The scent of sunscreen and chlorine hung in the air, and the sounds of children laughing echoed across the giant wave pools and twisting water slides. Among the crowd, walking calmly but confidently through the main entrance, was a man easily recognized by many, even if he wore dark sunglasses and a simple white t-shirt. It was Mike Tyson, former heavyweight champion of the world. But today, he wasn't a celebrity or an athlete. Today, he was just a loving uncle, accompanying his sister and her daughter for a special day. Beside him walked his younger sister, LaTanya, a kind woman in her mid-30s who held tightly to the handle of a motorized wheelchair. In it sat her daughter, Kiara, a bright-eyed, sharp-tongued 11-year-old with an energy that defied her physical limits. Born with a condition that left her legs paralyzed from the waist down, Kiara had grown up facing limitations most kids her age couldn't even imagine. But if you asked anyone who knew her, they'd say she didn't let that stop her for a second. "Are we seriously going to the water park for my birthday?" Kiara beamed, looking up at Mike. "I thought we were just going to get tacos." "I don't do boring birthdays," Mike said with a grin. "Today's your day, and if you want tacos too, we'll get 20. Kiara laughed and spun the joystick on her wheelchair, maneuvering ahead of them like a little general in command of her army. The entrance attendant at the gate smiled as they approached. "Welcome to Blue Falls." Mike handed over the passes. "VIP zone, please. Reservation under Tyson." The attendant's eyebrows lifted for a second before she nodded and let them through. The water park was massive. Dozens of slides, lazy rivers, splash pads, and shaded cabanas. The VIP zone was just past the main pool, beneath a canopy of palm trees. Mike walked beside Kiara as she zipped ahead, weaving through the crowd with impressive precision. Hey, not too fast now," LaTanya called after her. "I was born fast," Kiara replied with a grin. "Can't walk, so I drive like a boss." Mike and LaTanya laughed. They arrived at the shaded lounge, and Mike helped arrange a large beach towel and umbrella while LaTanya unpacked snacks and sunscreen. Kiara parked her chair beside the bench, popping a juice box open and taking a long sip. "Best birthday ever," she declared, feet dangling lifelessly above the pool deck. For the next hour, the family relaxed. Mike went to grab drinks while LaTanya and Kiara chatted about school and books. Kiara loved to read, mostly fantasy novels about kids with powers. She said it made her forget the wheels beneath her. But just as peace had settled, a shadow fell over their lounge space. "Excuse me," came a low, gruff voice. "This isn't a medical zone." LaTanya looked up. Standing in front of them was a man in a blue uniform shirt with a park security badge sewn on. He was tall, white, broad-chested, and sunburned. His name tag read R. McGregor. But what stood out most was the tightness of his expression, like his face had been carved from stone, permanently twisted into judgment. "We're in the VIP area," LaTanya said calmly. "Everything was pre-arranged. You can check the reservation." "I'm not talking about your reservation," he snapped. "That chair shouldn't be parked here. It's blocking the view." Kiara looked up at him, annoyed. "You mean my body is in the way of your pretty palm trees?" "Watch your tone," McGregor growled. "I wasn't aware I needed to ask permission to exist," Kiara replied coolly. McGregor's jaw clenched. "Maybe this park isn't the best place for someone like you. There are safety issues. Water and, Wheels don't mix. LaTanya stood now. "Sir, please step away from my daughter. She has every right to be here." The guard turned to her. "Look, lady, I'm just doing my job. We've had complaints about wheelchair kids taking up space near the pool." Kiara narrowed her eyes. "You mean one wheelchair kid? Me?" Before the situation escalated further, Mike returned, holding 3 drinks in a cardboard tray. His eyes moved quickly from LaTanya's protective stance to the towering man in the uniform. "What's going on?" he asked. "This man says I'm too disabled to sit near the pool," Kiara said loudly, enough for people nearby to hear. McGregor turned, catching sight of Mike Tyson, and instantly stiffened. "I didn't say that." "She's not dumb," Mike said flatly. "If that's how you treat kids, you shouldn't be working security." "I was enforcing safety protocol," McGregor said quickly. "And I didn't know she was with you." Mike stepped forward slowly. "So, if she was just with her mom, you'd have kept pushing her around?" McGregor didn't reply. Mike held his gaze for a moment, then turned to Kiara. "Everything all right, baby girl?" "Yeah," she said, lifting her chin. "He's just mad that I'm smarter than him." Mike chuckled, and LaTanya exhaled. McGregor muttered something under his breath and walked away, though not without throwing a look of quiet hatred over his shoulder. That wasn't the last they would see of him. After he left, Kiara looked up at her uncle. "You didn't have to come charging in like that." "I wasn't charging," Mike said. "I was observing. Big difference. You were about to knock him out." "Would have been his second worst day after high school," Mike grinned. The rest of the afternoon passed in peace, though an uneasy tension remained. Mike couldn't shake the look in McGregor's eyes, that look of someone who'd been embarrassed and wasn't used to being challenged. A man like that, Mike knew, wouldn't just walk away quietly. And he was right, because while the sun shone and Kiara played by the pool's edge, her legs covered in a towel, McGregor was watching from a distance, his eyes narrow, his fists clenched. He'd lost face in front of strangers, and worse, in front of that man. He didn't forget things like that, and soon he would act on it. The next day began just as hot and bright as the one before. Blue Falls was packed again, kids racing through puddles, lifeguards blowing their whistles, and music pulsing lightly through the speakers scattered across the park. Kiara had begged to come back, and Mike had agreed, though with quiet caution. LaTanya hesitated, but Kiara's birthday glow hadn't worn off yet, and she didn't want to dim it. They arrived earlier this time and picked a new spot near the big wave pool, not far from the snack bar. Mike bought her a smoothie and gave her his hat for the sun. Kiara parked her chair beside the low wall, just watching the waves roll in with wide eyes. She couldn't swim, but she loved the sound and the rhythm of the water. Mike sat back on a bench, sipping water, his eyes casually moving across the crowd. He hadn't seen McGregor yet, and he hoped maybe the guard had been reassigned or warned after yesterday's confrontation. But then he saw him. Across the pool deck, McGregor stood by the lifeguard tower, arms folded, sunglasses on. He wasn't patrolling, he was watching. His body language was tense, rigid, like a dog barely held back by a chain. Mike said nothing, but his jaw tightened. Kiara didn't notice at first. She was too busy waving at a couple of younger kids who had recognized her from the day before. One of them brought over a foam ball and asked if she wanted to play toss. She laughed and nodded, tossing the ball gently with her left hand while her right worked the wheelchair controls. LaTanya stepped away for a few minutes to get them some fries, and Mike leaned back, taking in the sky, pretending to relax. But his ears were still tuned to every sound near Kiara. Then McGregor made his move. He approached from the side, slow and casual, but with purpose. Kiara noticed him when he was a few feet away. She stopped tossing the ball and straightened up slightly in her chair. "You again?" she said, already annoyed. McGregor didn't smile. "Told you this park isn't made for wheels." "You're right. It's made for brains. So what are you doing here?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think your little jokes are funny? You think hiding behind that chair makes you special?" "I don't need to be special," Kiara said. "I just need to be left alone, which you can't seem to do." He looked around briefly. No lifeguards nearby, no adults close enough to interfere. The kids had gone back to the pool. Then he said it, low, cruel, deliberate. "You're just another loud-mouthed, broken little charity case. You don't belong here. You don't belong anywhere." Kiara blinked. For a second, the words hit her harder than she expected. But then she steadied herself and replied, "At least I didn't break by choice. What's your excuse?" His face twitched. Then, with no more words, he lunged forward and grabbed the back of her wheelchair. Kiara screamed. He shoved hard. The chair rolled forward, picking up speed as it neared the water's edge. People turned. Mike heard the scream. The wheelchair slammed into the lip of the pool and tipped. Kiara flew forward, hitting the water with a splash. The weight of the electric chair pulled her down instantly. For a moment, the world froze. Time slowed. Then Mike Tyson dropped his bottle and sprinted. His legs pounded the ground. In 4 strides, he cleared the path, his sandals flying from his feet. He dove, arms slicing the air, and hit the water like a bullet. Below the surface, everything was blue and frantic. Kiara was struggling, bubbles escaping her mouth, her arms flailing weakly. The chair was sinking. Mike grabbed her around the waist, kicking hard to rise. His lungs burned, but he didn't stop. He burst through the surface with Kiara in his arms. The crowd gasped. Lifeguards rushed over. Mike carried her through the water, coughing and shaking until he reached the shallow end. A medic took her gently, laying her on the pavement, checking her breathing. LaTanya came running, dropping the tray of food, screaming Kiara's name. "She's okay," the medic said, breathing, just shocked. Kiara coughed again, eyes wide, body trembling under the towel. Mike stood up, soaked, dripping, silent. He turned slowly. McGregor stood a few feet away, arms out, trying to act confused. It slipped. She must have. Maybe she rolled it herself." Mike didn't speak. He just walked toward him. Calm, silent, deadly. McGregor backed up. "You're crazy, man. Don't touch me." Mike moved faster. 1 step, 2, 3. Then a right hook landed square in McGregor's jaw, sending him flying backward. The man hit the pavement hard and groaned, clutching his face. Blood poured from his lip. People screamed. Some cheered. Phones recorded. One kid shouted, "Yo, Tyson just destroyed that guy." Park security came running. 2 LAPD officers working off duty for park detail joined them. Mike raised his hands. "He pushed my niece into the pool. She can't swim. She's disabled. You got cameras. You got witnesses." A woman stepped up, phone raised. "I saw it. I have it on video. He shoved her." Another man nodded. "She was just sitting there. He attacked her." The officers looked at McGregor, now sitting up, dazed and bleeding. "Put your hands behind your back," one of them said, cuffing the disgraced guard. "You're under arrest for assault and reckless endangerment." As they hauled him to his feet, McGregor spat. "It was just a joke. She was mouthing off." Mike didn't flinch. He walked back to Kiara and LaTanya. Kiara reached out for him with one trembling hand. He knelt beside her, brushing her soaked hair off her face. "You okay?" he whispered. She nodded, eyes glassy. He said, "I didn't belong." Mike hugged her tight, his soaked shirt clinging to both of them. "You belong more than he ever did," he said, "and this park is lucky to have you here." Nearby, the police took statements. Paramedics checked Kiara again, confirmed she was stable. Her chair was gone, sunk to the bottom, but the park promised to cover it fully. As McGregor was taken away in handcuffs, the crowd began to clap quietly. It wasn't celebration, it was recognition. Mike Tyson hadn't come here for a fight, but one had come to him, and he finished it the only way he knew how, with strength, but also with purpose. Because this wasn't about power, it was about justice, and justice had just landed like a fist. The ambulance pulled out of the Blue Falls parking lot under the orange glow of the setting sun. Its lights off, but sirens still fresh in everyone's memory. Kiara sat inside wrapped in a thermal blanket, her hair still damp, her eyes heavy but aware. Beside her, LaTanya held her hand, whispering softly while trying not to let her own fear show. Mike followed in his black SUV, and his jaw clenched, arms stiff on the wheel. Every few minutes he glanced at the ambulance ahead, making sure it kept moving. At the hospital, Kiara was quickly examined. The doctor confirmed what Mike already knew. She was lucky. Her vitals were stable, no broken bones, no water in her lungs. The shock had been the worst of it. They kept her overnight for observation, but she was already cracking jokes by morning. "He hit the water like a ninja," Kiara told the nurse with a weak grin. "You should have seen him." Mike sat beside her, quiet. Every time he looked at her, soaked and pale under the sheet, something burned in his chest. The memory of her chair vanishing under the water. Her scream. That moment of helplessness. He hadn't felt helpless in years. By the next afternoon, they were discharged. The hospital offered to call a cab, but Mike insisted on driving them himself. Before leaving, he got a copy of the incident report and added it to a growing folder in his backpack. Once home, Kiara was set up on the couch with blankets and cartoons. A neighbor dropped off soup. Another brought a gift card for a new chair. Word was spreading. But Mike didn't rest. That evening, he drove downtown to the LAPD station. He didn't come in as a celebrity. He came in as a man filing a formal complaint. He handed over the video footage, the hospital papers, and the written statement he'd prepared. The officer behind the desk raised his eyebrows when he saw McGregor's name. "You're not the first." Mike looked him in the eye. "Make sure I'm the last." 2 days later, the call came in. The DA's office had seen the footage. Charges were moving forward. Assault of a minor, reckless endangerment, hate-motivated misconduct. The judge denied bail. McGregor stayed behind bars while awaiting trial. The media picked it up fast. News outlets ran headlines like, "Mike Tyson saves disabled niece from attack," and "Former boxer stops water park tragedy." Social media exploded. Hashtags like #Justice for Kiara and #Tyson the Protector trended for days. Celebrities tweeted support. Disability rights groups organized petitions calling for McGregor to be banned from all future security work. But for Mike, the spotlight didn't matter. What mattered was the trial. He showed up in a black suit, no glasses, no smile. LaTanya sat with Kiara near the front of the courtroom. The little girl wore a new purple jacket and had her hair tied up in neat braids. Her new wheelchair gleamed beside her. It had a custom sticker on the side, "I bite back." McGregor looked smaller in court. His tan faded under the pale fluorescent lights. His lawyer tried to downplay the incident, calling it a misunderstanding, a bad angle on the footage. But the video was clear, and so were the witnesses. Kiara took the stand. Her voice was soft, but her words were sharp. He told me I didn't belong, that I was broken. He pushed me in the water. He knew I couldn't swim. The courtroom was silent. Mike testified next. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "She's my niece," he said simply. He tried to drown her. End of story. The defense attorney shifted uncomfortably. The judge watched carefully, and the jury listened. Next came the park staff. One by one, they described McGregor's history, his warnings, his complaints about special needs kids, his temper. No one had spoken up before. But now, seeing Kiara in the courtroom, they regretted their silence. The final blow came when the prosecution played footage from the security camera. It showed McGregor clearly stepping behind Kiara, grabbing her chair and shoving it forward. The pool, the fall, the splash. Gasps echoed. The judge recessed. The jury took only 3 hours. Guilty. The sentence, 3 years in prison without parole. A $50,000 fine, half of which would go toward Kiara's medical costs and the replacement of her chair. And a permanent ban from working in any public safety or security role. McGregor sat frozen as the bailiff cuffed him again. His eyes didn't meet Kiara's. Or Mike's. He stared at the floor, muttering something no one could hear. After the verdict, reporters waited outside. Mike didn't speak to them. He just wrapped one arm around Kiara and one around LaTanya and walked them to the car. The crowd parted in silence. Back at home, there were balloons tied to the mailbox, cards stuck in the doorframe, a banner from the neighborhood kids that read, "Kiara is our hero." Mike carried her up the ramp, the new one he'd just installed himself, wider, stronger, painted purple. That night, they sat on the porch under the stars. Kiara leaned against him, her hand in his. "You think he'll think about me in jail?" she asked. "He'll think about the mistake he made," Mike said, "and you'll be out here, living your life. That's what matters." She smiled, eyes sleepy. "I'm glad you were there." Mike kissed the top of her head. "Always will be." The world kept spinning. The headlines faded, but justice had been served. Not because Mike Tyson threw a punch, but because he stood up, spoke out, refused to let someone like McGregor walk away clean, and because Kiara, small, brave, and fierce, had the courage to look a bully in the eye and never flinch. Weeks passed, and the dust from the trial slowly began to settle. The story of what had happened at Blue Falls remained fresh in people's minds. But the media moved on, and the headlines were replaced by newer scandals and celebrity gossip. For Mike Tyson and his family, however, the impact remained real and close. Yet, through the storm, something remarkable began to bloom. Not in the news, but in the community around them. Kiara returned to school a week after the verdict. Her classmates welcomed her like a returning champion. There were balloons taped to her locker, cards from students and teachers, and even a welcome banner drawn in crayon by the younger kids that read, "We love Kiara." For a while, she felt awkward with all the attention, but Mike told her something one night at dinner that stuck. "Sometimes when bad things happen, people look for light. And, baby girl, you became the light." She smiled at that, and from that day, she started to hold her head higher. Meanwhile, LaTanya kept getting calls. Parents, disability advocates, news stations. Everyone wanted to talk to her about what they could do to make parks, schools, and public places safer and more accessible. She wasn't a public speaker, but she started answering. She spoke at a PTA meeting, then at a community panel. Her voice, calm and steady, became part of something larger than just their story. And Mike? He stayed mostly quiet, as always, but his presence loomed large. He began receiving letters from parents of disabled children, thanking him for what he did. One letter came from a man in Georgia whose daughter had been bullied out of a swim club. Another from a single mother in Texas who wrote, "You reminded me what real protection looks like." Mike didn't read most of the letters more than once. He didn't need praise. He needed change. That's when the idea for the new park zone took shape. It started with a call from Blue Falls Executive Board. After reviewing internal footage, staff statements, and public reaction, the owners wanted to make things right. Not just for PR, but truly right. They asked Mike to return, not just as a guest, but as a partner. He agreed, on one condition. Kiara had to approve everything, and she did. She drew sketches with colored pencils listing all the features she wanted: wide ramps, waterproof wheelchair paths, floating vests in every size, extra staff training, and a special chill zone for kids with sensory sensitivities. She even named it herself, Kiara's Zone. Construction began quickly. Fencing was put up, signs posted. Coming soon, Kiara's Zone, because everyone deserves the water. Families took photos in front of the banner. Children asked when it would open, and when the day finally came, the grand opening felt like something from a movie. There was music and laughter and a stage built beside the pool. Local officials came along with families from all over the state. LaTanya gave a short speech. The mayor thanked her for her courage. Then it was time for the ribbon cutting. Kiara, in a glittering purple top and fresh braids, rolled forward with golden scissors in hand. She paused at the microphone. "I used to think parks like this weren't for kids like me," she said. "Now I know they just hadn't met the right kid yet." The crowd erupted in applause as she cut the ribbon. Water sprayed into the air from hidden fountains. Dozens of children in wheelchairs or with walkers entered the water alongside their families. Smiles lit every face. Mike stood back by the fence, arms crossed, watching it all. Someone tapped his shoulder, a reporter. "Would you like to say a few words, Mr. Tyson?" He shook his head. "This ain't my show, it's hers." The reporter turned back toward the pool, where Kiara was already racing another girl down the new splash lane. Later that day, the family returned home exhausted but glowing. Kiara fell asleep early, still wearing her event wristband. LaTanya curled up on the couch, sipping tea and scrolling through dozens of messages and photos from other parents. Mike stepped outside into the quiet, leaning against the porch railing. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the front yard. He thought about everything that had happened. The fear, the anger, the courtroom, and now this. Not peace exactly, but something close. Behind him, the door creaked. Kiara wheeled herself out, yawning. "Can't sleep," she said. "You just did a full parade," Mike said, smirking. "Too many thoughts," she mumbled. He nodded and looked at the sky. "Yeah, I know what that's like." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Kiara said, "Do you think he's still thinking about me, that guard?" Mike's expression didn't change, but his voice was soft. "I think he's thinking about the worst mistake of his life. And the best part? You're still out here living. He can't take that from you." She nodded slowly, then smiled. "You're a good uncle, you know. You're a better niece." They both laughed. And for the first time in a long time, the night felt warm. Not because of the weather, but because something cruel had been pushed out of their lives. Justice had been served. A community had grown stronger. And one little girl in a wheelchair had proven to the world that strength isn't about fists. It's about being unshakable in the face of hate. Summer slowly turned to fall in Los Angeles, and with it came a peaceful rhythm that had been missing for some time. Kiara's life began to settle back into something normal, or at least her version of it. School, reading, laughter with her friends, and weekend visits to the new section of Blue Falls now lovingly known as Kiara's Zone. What once was a place of fear had become her second home, a symbol of resilience, not pain. She had her new wheelchair now, sleek, smooth, and painted with violet streaks like lightning bolts. Her name was etched in chrome across the back, and above it, a small sticker of a lion in boxing gloves, a gift from Mike. Whenever she moved through the neighborhood or the school hallways, she carried with her the story of what had happened. But more importantly, she carried how it ended. Mike continued to play the same role he always had. Not the loud hero, not the ex-boxer making noise on talk shows, but the steady presence in Kiara's life. He still picked her up from school, still brought her mango smoothies on Sundays, still sat on the porch with her when the sky turned orange and the world grew quiet. But the impact of what happened had grown beyond them. Letters still arrived every week. Some were from kids with disabilities thanking Kiara for giving them a voice. Others were from parents who said they'd finally pushed for accessible playgrounds in their towns. One letter came from a teacher in Detroit who showed the trial footage in class as part of a lesson on courage. Kiara read each letter carefully, saving her favorites in a purple binder marked Power. Blue Falls wasn't the only place that changed. After Kiara's Zone opened, other parks across the state began requesting plans and consultations. Mike was offered several roles on advocacy boards. He turned most of them down, except for one, a committee working to make state-funded recreational spaces more inclusive. He didn't wear suits or make speeches. He just sat at the table, listened, and when necessary, spoke from the heart. Justice hadn't ended with the sentencing. It had evolved. One day, during a quiet Saturday morning, a knock came at the door. Mike answered it to find a nervous young man in a polo shirt holding a folder and a nervous smile. "Mr. Tyson, I'm with the city council. We'd like to name a community initiative after you." Mike raised an eyebrow. "Why?" The man swallowed. "Because you saved a child, stood up against hate, and reminded people what protection means." Mike looked back toward the living room where Kiara was laughing at something on TV. "Name it after her," he said. "She did the hard part." The man nodded and left, and a week later, the Kiara Strong Initiative was announced. Its purpose, to fund equipment, training, and education around disability inclusion in public schools and parks. LaTanya, once soft-spoken and quiet, now gave speeches at events. She talked about motherhood, about fear, and about the power of showing up. At one event, she said, "We thought we were alone, but we weren't. We just needed the world to open its eyes." And as for Kiara, she kept growing, not just taller, but stronger. She joined a wheelchair basketball team. She started a blog. Her posts were witty, bold, and honest. One went viral. It was titled, "My Wheels Are Not Your Excuse." In it, she wrote, "Don't feel sorry for me. I don't want pity. I want space to roll. I want respect when I speak. I want to be heard, not handled. I want you to know that the only thing I've ever needed is a chance, and maybe a ramp that isn't broken." It was shared by athletes, actors, and disability activists around the world. On a quiet afternoon, Mike and Kiara visited Blue Falls again. The park had slowed down now. That summer had ended, but Kiara's zone remained open. A group of new kids in wheelchairs were splashing around under water cannons while parents watched from shaded benches. Kiara rolled up to the edge of the pool and smiled. "It's weird," she said. "What is?" Mike asked, sitting beside her. How something terrible turned into all this. Mike looked around. That's what happens when people don't run from pain. They grow through it. They sat in silence for a few minutes, just listening to the water and the laughter. Then Kiara turned to him. "You think I'll ever forget it? That day?" Mike looked at her carefully. "No, and that's okay. You don't have to forget. You just have to remember who you became after." Kiara nodded. She didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden lines across the surface of the water, a breeze passed through the park. Mike and Kiara sat together, side by side. One man who once fought in a ring, and one girl who never stopped fighting for her place in the world. And in that moment, it was clear. The true knockout had never been in the punch. It had been in the way they stood back up.